Here we go. What is going on, Cover One Crew? Welcome back to the show. If everybody is doing good, man. Monday Night Football in the books. I think Jalen Hurts just threw another interception as I'm talking right now. Unbelievable. What a contest it was. Not, man. Lots of turnovers, sloppy play. But what are we talking today? Must-have players. Fantasy playoffs round 1. Got your playoff help here on the waiver wire. Not necessarily guys we got to stack anymore. We just got to look for anybody we can add into our lineups to give us that competitive edge. That is the name of the game, man. Round 1, week 15. If you made it in the playoffs, congratulations. Let's ride, man. Trophy season starts now, and we got to get all the players that we can to at least attempt to get these trophies. It is big time. So let's start off with these running backs. Talking first one on the board is Blake Corum. These Los Angeles Rams, unbelievable, this dude, man. I guess, it was versus the Arizona Cardinals, and they're done. Their season's over, and Kyren Williams are saving them for the postseason, clearly, and Blake Corum has always been a very good running back. Going back to his Michigan days, you know what he was. It's just he didn't get a lot of traction. It was slow starting for him, starting his NFL career. Now we're seeing exactly why the Rams drafted him. He is very much similar to the, skill set likeness of somebody like a Kyren Williams, and he definitely showcased that. What do you have? 27 points this past week. There is potential that this guy down the stretch here of these last 4 weeks will become a very strong, multi-dimensional, multifaceted type of backfield in this LA Rams backfield with Kyren Williams, where we can trust him on the weekly because the volume upside is there. Does it mean it's going to cap off a Kyren Williams? Potentially, but at least we're going to see something like a Bijan, Tyler Algier effect with a Blake Corum, so there is good potential. 48% ownership right now, 83 points on the board. And they're taking on the Detroit Lions this week. So there is potential possibilities that we can actually plug and play a Blake Corum this week as well versus the Lions, who have been struggling, of recent on the offensive side of the ball. But it is Jahmyr Gibbs and company. So Blake Corum, he is going to be a decent one this week for the first week of the fantasy playoffs. Jalen Wright for these Miami Dolphins. Now it news that Devin off the HN. Okay, he got some his ribs nicked up, but they're saying he's no worse for wear. He was an emergency running back as that game did wear on. But Wright and Ollie Gordon definitely did take over that contest versus those New York Jets, as it was out of hand anyway. So there was no reason to get HN hurt that much further. So we'll see how the week does shape out. But if HN is definitely one of these injuries where he cannot suit up, he cannot go, Jalen Wright would be the instant, speed back appeal, taking over in HN's role, even though it would go right into a split backfield with an Ollie Gordon, who is my dude. But we saw what Jalen Wright can do on the field when he does have the wheels. He does have the ability, just like HN does, and it does work in this offense with a Mike McDaniel who does love the speed, utilizes it perfectly within his playbook. So it would be Wright for the speed game, and it would be Ollie Gordon for the goal line upside and potential volume, because Ollie can move in his own right as well. He's just not as fast as Jalen Wright. So second one on my board would be a Jalen Wright, 4% owned right now, 23 points, and he is taking on those Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh this week. Well, we definitely got to see how the status of a Devin off the HN first, but if it would definitely be a definite priority going for a Jalen Wright for me. Tyler Algier continues to be under 50% owned on these waiver wires, taking on Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we know the Falcons are done. You got yourself another 8 points this past week as well, half PPR leagues. So you got to like what you can get, at least from the flex opportunity. You're seeing a lot of very much piss-poor play in the NFL these days, and if somebody like Algier is giving us anywhere from 8 to 12 points a week, you sign me up all day long for that flex appeal for this one. So, 101 points on the season, 46% owned. I don't get the disrespect, man. This guy does nothing but put up points. Yes, the ceiling is not, abundant, and it's definitely capped off because of Bijan, but you're still getting valuable points, and the name of the game right now is scoring as many points as humanly possible in the aggregate of your team, so Algier would definitely give us a leg up. Devin Motor Singletary, 46% owned right now, taking on the Washington Commanders. The Commies this week, they're coming off the bye, so Jackson Dart in this run game with Tyrone Tracy and a Devin Singletary have been decent enough. Is it going to be warranting of giving us that, top end appeal? Probably not, but at least 10 points out of a Motor Singletary is not out of the question, especially with how Jackson Dart does play football as well. With new head coaching staff, they do utilize the running backs much more than someone like Brian Dable, which was very odd to say the least. But if you are struggling for extra depth at the running back position that you got to plug and play in your lineup, taking on these commies is definitely a play that I'm willing to gamble on with Devin Singletary and Tyrone Tracy this week as well. There could be some good upside in that respect. And Ollie Gordon taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers, like I said, with Devin off the A-chain. I mean, it is one of these situations. Like I said, we got to watch the situation when it comes to his health and his potential recovery. Is he going to be good to go? They said, there was no major fracture. It could just be bruised ribs. But again, that's going to be difficult. Why injure the man further if they don't have to, especially with their season in the books basically anyway? We will see. But Ollie Gordon would definitely have a role on this Miami Dolphins with a Jalen Wright if Devin Achane is going to miss any time, or if he is going to be hampered in this contest. They could use a triple-headed backfield, which would muddy the waters to make us understand what they're going to do. But I don't dislike the play of it, Ollie Gordon, if Achane does sit this week as well. Quarterbacks, we got the first one, C.J. Stroud and these Houston Texans. Man, that defense in Houston is legit a Super Bowl unit. They will, if they get this offense moving even 25% better efficiency rates than what they are now, this team could be very dangerous in the NFL playoffs. But we got to talk C.J. Stroud. Has not been great overall this season, man. 144 points on the year. Not great overall. Nico Collins still balling out. The run game is definitely something to be desired, and they're still continuing to look for that secondary option with a Higgins, with a Jalen Noel, with Dalton Schultz and company. It just hasn't been that high-octane offensive unit that we would have hoped for and have seen in the past. But this week they do take on those Arizona Cardinals, who gave up a heaping of points to those LA Rams. This is a get-right game for Houston in the biggest of ways. If you have been streaming quarterbacks your entire season, you're looking for somebody to plug and play this week, C.J. Stroud is the number one priority. 40% owned right now, should be in most of y'all's leagues, and you could definitely plug and play him this week. I don't dislike picking up C.J. Stroud if you don't have better options than that this week. Marcus Mariota for these Washington Commanders, 15% ownership rate taking on those New York Giants. Very good matchup for Mariota once again. We will see if Jaden Daniels does sit this week. It is one of these cautionary tales where he did fall on his elbow and he missed the rest of that contest. Mariota came in and filled in relief. I don't understand, like I said on Start Sit, why they're playing a Jaden Daniels anymore this season. Shut it down. Let the kid heal up. What if he tears his ACL? Then what are you going to do, man? Just shut the kid down. Let him stop playing. Marcus Mariota is good enough to finish off the rest of the 4 games of the regular season. You're not going to get anything better. But right now, 15% ownership rate for Mariota. Against the New York Giants defense that isn't necessarily great. They do got a good front line that can still come after the quarterback, but they can be gashed in a very big way. Now a scary Terry back, Debo playing well. If Mariota is going to suit up, I don't dislike the stream this week as well, where we got Shedeur Sanders. My dude Sanders, the number one quarterback for me coming out of the last year's NFL draft. I told y'all, man, it's got footwork and the ability to throw dimes on the field. That was my evaluation for the most part to put him above a Cam Ward coming out of this draft class. Now you're seeing exactly what I'm talking about. You see some of those dimes this kid can throw. He has got the ability. Yes, he's erratic at times. Pocket presence was good. Footwork was good. Ability to at least evade the rush and get those pinpoint passes down the field. He doesn't have the strongest of arms, but this guy can put it in the bucket when he needs to, and he put up a nice, 30-plus points this past week. Found my other dude, Harold Fannin Jr., only Fannins, on multiple occasions. Huge contest for both these gentlemen. Yes, they are taking on the Chicago Bears. Yes, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but we will see. I mean, if you are desperate, deeper leagues, and he is on your waiver wire, 18% ownership right now, we could still discuss the potential of playing Shedeur Sanders. Do I want to go into round 1 of the playoffs in a 12-man league with Shedeur as my quarterback? No, probably not, because this is going to be definitely boom or bust appeal for Sanders moving forward, but he is on the list because of the last contest that he did play, was named the starter for the remainder of the season from these Cleveland Brownies, so there is definitely upside to be had from a Shedeur Sanders, but you got to be in a lot of desperation if you're going to use him this week. He still is on the board, as there is not a lot of streaming quarterbacks left with greater value. Or Tyler Shogg is another one of these guys. He is playing. What I say about Shogg too, man, I did like the mechanics of this kid. Yeah, he was in college for like 300 years, but he's mature and he understands. He's able to run. You saw the rushing upside with versus Tampa Bay Buccaneers this past week as well. And Shogg is a good quarterback. He does make a lot of mistakes. Footwork is okay, but his mechanics is what drew me to him. Very good throwing motion, and as soon as he gets more comfortable with this offensive scheme, with the NFL game, you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. But the fact that he is a dual threat quarterback as well, he could take off with his legs like we saw. Got you about 18 points last week. You could do a lot worse than a Tyler Shogg's 18 points taking on these Carolina Panthers, but that defense in Carolina is a lot better. So I fully expect it to be a lot tougher this week on him as well. But if, again, much like a Shedeur Sanders, if you are desperate for a quarterback, he is definitely on the wire for you at least to consider. Wide receivers, Jerry Jeudy's back in the mix because of Shedeur Sanders. 50% ownership. I've been very hard on a Jerry Jeudy all season long, but it wasn't based on him not necessarily producing. It's who's throwing him the football. You know, Dylan Gabriel just could not get him the football. We saw with Joe Flacco, you know, and company. I mean, it is what it is. When Flacco played, he was able to do it. When Jameis Winston played with him last season, we saw Jerry Jeudy flourish. Now with Shedeur Sanders, at least we're starting to see it unpack just a little bit. 15-plus points last week. This should continue, even versus Chicago Bears. 50% ownership rate. He could still be on your waiver wire and warranting of low-end wide receiver 3 flex appeal numbers for round 1 of the playoffs. I definitely do like Jeudy this week. Kayshon Boutte. You like booty? Well, here's some Boutte. 43% owned right now, taking on my Buffalo Bills. Huge contest to keep steady and keep pace. If the Patriots win this game versus Buffalo Bills, they'll basically have the division locked up for the AFC East, which is crazy. First time in, like 5 or 6 years, the Bills have not won this, but almost 100 points. And we know basically every time the Bills play the Patriots and Boutte's been on the field, He's been a producer because they do lock away the top-end wide receiver, and that in this case will be probably Benford on a Stephon Diggs. Weekend Diggs it, but I'm telling you, 100 points for Kayshon Boutte. The way that Drake May has been slinging the football, they are coming off the bye week, so they'll have extra preparation for those Buffalo Bills. I do like Kayshon Boutte off the waiver wire at 43%. We can definitely pick him up and play him and hope for the best here in round 1 of the playoffs. Luther Burden, so long as a Rome Odunze continues to be out, he is week to week with that foot injury. They're taking on those Cleveland Brownies. Might be a little difficult. I foresee a bounce-back game for that Cleveland Browns defense that absolutely wet the bed this week versus Tennessee Titans. Allowed Tony Pollard to run like it's what Dallas Cowboys Tony Pollard at this point. But Luther Burden does have some appeal, but the floor is definitely going to be meeker than most if you have other options. Jeudy and Boutte would be my number 1 and 2 picks over somebody like Luther Burden versus the Cleveland Browns, which is going to be a difficult task in itself. But at least without a Rome Odunze, we know targets were going to his direction. But, I mean, this passing offense in Chicago isn't necessarily abundant for points either, so you definitely got to pick your poison. Higgins from the Houston Texans taking on those Arizona Cardinals. Like I said, if it's a get-right game in the biggest of ways for C.J. Stroud, he's got to start spreading that football around, and Higgins could have himself a very nice day. We know Nico's going to eat. We know that this run game does attempt its best to run the football. You got to start throwing this football a lot more down the field. Higgins could be a beautiful pickup and play this week. A touchdown upside definitely out the wazoo. 47% ownership rate. 80 points on the season for Higgins. I do like that play. Jaden Reed coming back from his injury. Got some sprinkles of targets, and then he was kind of an afterthought as everything else went to a Christian Watson. So if you're desperate, I mean, just understand the point totals are very low for a Reed, but the big play upside coming back. I believe this was his first game back, or maybe his second game back now. But, I mean, at this point, at least just getting his feet wet back, shaking the rust off the field, he will be utilized more and more in this offense as they try to spread out this Denver Broncos defense this week. 47% owned. I mean, it is one of these situations. I'm not necessarily rushing to the wire to grab a Reed, but he is an option if you did deal with some injuries. And we know, like, situational, like the Indianapolis Colts without Daniel Jones, Daniel Pennies, and Riley Leonard is gone potentially with a knee injury. They're going to sign Phillip Rivers potentially to the quarterback room. I mean, it downgrades everybody in that Indianapolis Colts offense, including Pittman, Downs, Alec Pearson, and everybody. So you may be in the, questioning whether or not you start any of those guys. Guys like Jade Reed could be a fill-in for you as well, man. Darius Slayton taking on the Washington Commanders. Commies. And coming off the bye week, he had a good game, but going into the bye, there is viable option here as well to have a flex appeal. Wide receiver 3 potential for a Slayton. He does find his way into the end zone. Him and Wandale have been relatively steady. Wandale better, obviously, this season than Slayton, but Slayton does provide some upside if you do require a wide receiver this week as well. And the deeper leagues, only Ryan Flournoy, but Flournoy would jump my board if CeeDee Lamb does miss any time to due in part to that concussion, which I highly doubt, but keep Flournoy on your watch list just in case CeeDee Lamb does go down, because he is a talented route runner and he will make some plays if he does get the opportunity. Once again, coming off a career-high contest last week. Finish thing off with tight ends, man. Colston Loveland, like I said on Start Sit, he was going to eat without Roma Dunzier. He found his way into that end zone. If Caleb could just be a little bit more consistent, we would see a lot more passes going to this tight end. He's starting to make noise, starting to make waves, and with tight ends and how difficult it is to trust on a weekly basis, 53% ownership for Colston Loveland. Taking on those Cleveland Brownies, you're going to need that outlet, that check down, that chain-moving option for Caleb Williams. Colston Loveland should have another decent contest this week coming off the wire. 53%. I don't dislike the plug-and-play of a Loveland as well. Where Dalton Schultz, again, continuing down the path of, get-right game for these Texans on the offensive side. Schultz has been very good without C.J. Stroud. Davis Mills is when he starts to feed a Schultz on the regular. Maybe C.J. needs to take a couple pages out of that playbook and understand, utilize your tight end who is very good at catching footballs and can make your life a lot easier. Spread out the defense as well. Be that safety blanket you require. Schultz definitely has the appeal in this contest for red zone upside, but with C.J. Stroud, you got to take it with a grain of salt, man. He does not target the tight end as much as a Davis Mills does. Mike Gesicki taking on those Baltimore Ravens, and this is an interesting one because T. Higgins is back in concussion protocol. He smoked his head off that turf twice in that contest, and they let him return to the contest. Mofo still caught a couple TDs with those concussion symptoms. If T is going to miss this week as well, Mike Gesicki would be my guy. Yes, we could look at Andre Josevich as well, but it didn't really pan out the way I had envisioned when T went down the first time. It was a lot of Jamar Chase, Chase Brown, and a lot of Mike Gesicki. So I'm moving in that direction for the fantasy playoffs for Mike Gesicki. If T does miss time, I would actually bump a Mike Gesicki into Dalton Schultz's slot, my number 2 priority tight end, because he will get those receptions. He will get those targets to replace a T. Higgins. 5% ownership right now, taking on a Baltimore Ravens defense that is struggling and likely out of the postseason anyway. So Gesicki, if AT sits, would be my number 2 priority. Colby Parkinson taking on these Detroit Lions. They're going to need some outlets here as well. We know Matthew Stafford does like to target Parkinson quite a bit, and he is repaying us, man. 6.5 points to around 10 points. Finds his way into the end zone. We're up to the 13 mark with a Colby Parkinson. I do like the plug and play this week as well. It's going to be very tough versus Detroit Lions front 7. They will come after Matthew Stafford quite a bit. He will need a quick out, and Colby Parkinson could be very good in PPR upside this week as well. I do not dislike it. Darren Waller taking on Pittsburgh Steelers and these Miami Dolphins. Okay, I thought it was going to be a little bit better, but Tua's just struggling to get him the football overall. If no HN this week as well, Waller would get an uptick. Jalen Waddle would get an uptick as well, as the Pittsburgh Steelers still do play very sound defense, but they're going to need somebody to catch passes. Darren Waller would definitely be on my list. And continuing with A.J. Barner, okay, he hasn't necessarily hit off in the last couple contests, but taking on this Colts team, like I said, with no more Daniel Jones, it's going to be more defensive assistance required for these Colts to win, which means they're going to be on the field a lot more potentially. And that means that, the defense is going to get tired. A.J. Barner could get a lot of looks. We saw Sam Darnold finally break out of his funk this past week from seeing ghosts. So potentially A.J., but they got Rashid Shaheed finally involved as well. So Barner, a lot of mouths to feed on this pass game, but Barner definitely is here versus Colts to be a viable potential streaming option. But there you have it. That is round 1 of the fantasy football playoffs. Who can we pick up off the waiver wire and plug into our lineups? Got you covered. And definitely this week is going to be very interesting to see who's in, who's out based on injuries as we gear up for round 1 of the playoffs. But nevertheless, as always, don't forget that like button, hit that subscribe button, jump in those comments, give me your thoughts, and we'll see you next time. I am out.